Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you a quick way to make a jig that's used to install these hinges in the door or the door frame. It'll do both, and it uses a plunge router like this, and I'll show you how to do it without even using a tape measure. I found it's much simpler, more efficient, and faster to use this method I'm about to show you. So stay tuned and hope you enjoy the video, and good luck with your projects. Click the like and subscribe if you want to see more things like this. Take care. There. Just like that. So I'm going to make a jig here today to cut recesses to mount these hinges in the door and in the door frame using this router. So I'm going to make the jig on this plate here, on this piece of wood. This will become the jig base. And I'm going to first start by gluing and tacking these pieces of wood down here. This is the guide, and that'll be the outer edge of the guide for this plate of the router here. And so I'm going to get started by first just gluing these down. Pretty cold day out here. So I'll have to bring this inside after I finish making it to let the glue dry, because it'll freeze out here. Really cold. I'm just going to tack it down with some little nails for now, and the glue will be what actually holds it. Pretty hard to even handle those nails with the temperature out here. So this one I want to make sure that I get a true 90 on it. Then I'll go find a square, make sure I get that right. So I got a square here I can use, set that in place. And so now that I have that, that'll become the guide for this. This is about 7 centimeter distance from the edge of this plate to where the bit actually cuts. So what I'm going to do is drop it in there. I guess I'll bolt this down to something first. On here, that way I'm not cutting my table up. Actually, the nails go through a little, but I will hold it down a little better. So now I can put my router on there. And you can see how it will guide it there. And the first thing I'm interested in doing is getting this dimension this way, the length of this this hinge here. So what I'm going to do is turn this on. I've already set the depth so that it's a plunge router. So when I pull this lever, I can push down and it'll cut through the plywood and maybe cut into this other piece just slightly. So get started. I'm just going to cut a little bit of a line there. That's what I've got so far. So now I can take this hinge, and I see that I want it to be right on that edge there. And I'll come over here and mark this. And I want to cut to just before that line there. So it won't quite drop in. I'll go just a little further. This is a lot more accurate than just measuring. So that just drops in. That's good. So now I can set this down in there and slide it over till it stops, and then cut another piece of wood for my guide and tack it in here. So I'm going to do that right now. So what I can do is just glue that in right there and make sure it's at a 90. Come on, glue. I know it's cold. I'm going to slide that over until it stops. probably got it there. Let's see. I won't tack them in all the way. First I'm gonna make sure I got it. Seems like I don't. I have to make sure the bit is on the cutting edge too, to get the actual distance there. And I just want to check and make sure I got it square. Yep, that's pretty good. So now I'm going to check that out. See, I've cut a little bit there to compare. That's really a tight, snug fit. Drops right in there. Now what I want to do is get this depth here. And like I say, I want to cut it more. And so I'm going to mark it, say, right in this area here. So right about there is where I'm going to go with that. So now I'm just going to drag this along until I hit that line. And so I cut a piece for my stop in this area. Although I really don't really need one, I don't think. Debating on if I should put it in or not. I think I will. Yeah, actually, I think I'm not going to use a stop here. Because I may want to, there may be a time when I want to route the entire hinge out. And so I don't want to limit myself in that way. So I'm going to go ahead and just route this whole piece out here. now I have more than enough cut out there. And my hinge is a snug fit in there. That's very close. So I've labeled my jig so later I can see what that is and find it. I noticed that my finishing nails protruded to the back a little bit, and so I want to get rid of that. I'm going to use this Dremel cutoff wheel just to zip those off. So I've marked the location here where I want to install the middle hinge. And the first thing I did after I marked it, I come in here with a magnet and just make sure there isn't any metal hidden below the surface here to damage my bit. And I see that there isn't any, so I can proceed. And you'll notice there's this molding here. And what I need to do is attach this jig that's going to guide the router within this area here. I need to attach it on the door like that. And so the way I'm going to do it, I've got these pieces of shim wood that are just slightly taller than the molding. So I'm going to install one here and one there, and then another one along this side here. And they will actually space the router up off of the molding here, and it'll keep it level and on the same plane as this. So, and it'll provide a stable base so I can put my router down in here and route this little piece out. It doesn't have to be very deep, but it's just going to help me get an accurate route. And I'm going to actually route here on the frame first, because then I can take a measurement from the other hinge and transfer that to the door more easily than I can on the frame. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my router. So working on this little table here, I've got my router I'm going to use with the bit. This is the hinge I'm going to be installing. This is my router jig that I'm going to be using. And so what I'm going to do is use these spacers to space the jig off of the table to the correct distance here. So this simulates how high off of the surface is that I'm going to be routing. So next I'll set the router right down on there, and I'll loosen, there's a stop here. I can loosen that stop so it's free to move. And I can release the handle here and this is a plunge router. So I can release the plunge router and then push this router down until it contacts the base, the bottom here, and I'll lock it in place right there. And so then the next thing I'm going to do is I'll take my hinge and slip it up in here. This is the stop. I can slip it up in there and hold it and tighten the stop on it. And that will give me, so then when I pull that out, you'll notice there's a gap there from the actual stop. So what will happen if I release this, I don't want to do it now because it'll actually go into the table. But if I release the handle and push the router even further, it would go down exactly this depth of the thickness of the hinge. And so I'll prop this up on its side and you can see, hopefully. So there's that thickness there. I want to ensure that the router is able to move that distance. So I'm going to release the handle and squeeze it up in there. It's spring loaded. So there you go. It actually does contact the stop, and it lets the router bit travel on out. So now that rattle bit is would be eating into the wood of the door, just this thickness of the hinge. So my router is set up. We're going to release that. The depth is set up. The only thing I need to do now is attach this jig onto the frame. And to do that, I'm going to use these screws here. I'm going to drill a few holes in this router jig and run the screws through this plate, through this spacer, and into the door frame. And then so later I'll have about 4 screw holes into the door jamb that I'll just repair. And this is the drill bit I'm going to use to drill the clearance for these screws. Okay, so what I've got here, I went ahead and taped this side, this spacer to the side of the jig and drilled, and I've got some screws sitting in there. So I'm going to attach it to the frame on this side first, and then I'll come in on this side and add one piece here at the bottom and one at the top. But first there's a spacer here that I've cut, and it actually is the stop, how far off of this molding the cut will be. And so I've got this spacer that is exactly where I want it to be, and I can use it, I can hold it onto the molding and pull the jig to it, and it'll hold the jig exactly in line like I want it in the spacing I want. And so now all I have to do is screw this jig onto the door jamb. And I won't tighten it very much at all, because you can see when I tighten it, it's going to change. It's going to tend to rocket the jig that way. And so I've just got it held in place right now. And I'm going to confirm. I'm going to put my, this is my spacer. That will space the cut off of this molding by exactly this much. And so now I'm just going to go in and add moldings at the top and the bottom. So with these pieces here, so I could just slide one up in here. And just put a screw right in there. Then I'll slide another one in here, almost down to the hole, not quite. And you can see that gives a pretty solid base now. And I'll just run a screw in here. And so these are the screws I want to tighten down, because they're the ones that are directly over the hole. These I'll just come in and tighten them just a little bit. So now you can see the jig is solidly attached to the frame, and all I need to do is get the router, plunge it in here and make this cut. And you can see it's coming off of the the cut's going to start off of the jamb and cut into it, and then I'll work around it. But before I do that, I'm going to get some paper, tape some paper around this to contain the dust, and I'll also be using a shop vac to keep the dust from getting all over the house. But the jig is ready to go. And once I get the jig cut here, then I'll move the jig over onto the door and cut the matching slot in the door itself. So I've got a shop vac nozzle hooked up here to pull the cuttings out of the jig here. And that's going to my shop vac, and it's just got it screwed in right here temporarily. I'm gonna turn on the vacuum first. So all I need to do is square these edges here. Liking that. I'm gonna wait and screw that in when I'm done to make sure I get it perfectly in agreement with the other hinges. So I'm gonna be using this plastic wood filler to repair these screw holes that I made in the door jamb. So I'll work some of the filler into the hole. Trying to force it in. And then I come back with a damp rag and just lightly brush over it. And then when it dries, I won't have to sand it. I'll just I'll let it dry, and then I can paint that. And I've got there's two more down here. Do the same thing. And the wood filler is supposedly, it doesn't shrink. Sometimes it seems to though, and so before I paint it, I will go back and check, and if it's sunk in, I might add one more layer to it. So I'm going to reconfirm my measurement again before I set up my jig. And it was 684. I'm going to use a knife. Cut that mark in there. And then I'll use a square here. I've got a really crisp line there. And then I can use the hinge actually for the other side of it. So I've got a mark, I just want to make sure it's squared all the way. So that's where I want my hinge to be, right there. So I'll set up my jig next. So I've got the jig screwed in place and I'm happy with the alignment. You can just barely make out the cut marks that I made. And I've got a 2x4 clamped all the way across on this side. And that's going to prevent breakout of the bit. And down here, I've also clamped a 2x4 on this side just to help stabilize it, but probably not necessary. And then I've also added some paper that wraps around underneath. So it's completely enclosed except for this end here. And I'm going to put a shop vac in this side here to pull the chips away. So all the cutting is going to be happening down inside here. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop the bit down here and work across that way. And then go down, come back, and work like that and cut this entire area out here. So I'm about ready to cut this out. I'm going to plug in my router here. You always want to make sure the switch is off and the router bit is up when you plug it in. And I'm going to switch, I've got the vacuum hose coming in here, hoping to catch some chips. Get that started now. Actually, I just realized before I made the cut that I need to change the depth of the blade because it's set up for that spacer that I used in the door jamb, and I don't have it here. And luckily, I thought about it before I actually made the cut. So I'm going to now make that adjustment. I have a hinge right here with me. Unplug the router. And it's kind of the same process. I'm gonna drop the blade down so it contacts the wood of the door and lock it in place. And then I'm going to come over here and set my limit stop. I'm going to set my limit stop to this thickness of this hinge plus what it is now. So when I drop the, so now I can release this and put it back up. So I can drop this down and it will go just down the thickness of the hinge. So glad I thought of that because I was just about to make a big mistake there. I could fix it, but better not have to. Looks pretty good. So now I can just remove the clamps. And this paper did a pretty good job of pulling in all the chips. I don't see much, I'm sure there's some out there. Just remove this. And there's my routed recess for the hinge. And I'm pretty confident it'll fit because it did before. Yeah, that's a really perfect placement there. And I'm going to keep this unscrewed for now. It will allow me to have a fine adjustment to make sure that all the hinges are in alignment. Actually, it'll go in this way. Actually, like that, with the pin at the top. So thanks for watching, and good luck with your projects. So I've got the door in the frame, and there's just a little bit of minor trimming. I'm going to cut a little off the top right there, and then right there at the knob, it's dragging just a touch, and the bottom is pretty good. What I'm most pleased with is right here, the alignment of the hinge recess I made, but it will go right in there. Just like that. And so I can just open the door up and install the screws. And then you can see the door it opens, and the hinge is so tight in the fittings that it does just follow the door. So I'm going to let the door sit in here and acclimate to the house a few days before I take it off and sand it and plane it for the final time.